Good afternoon, folks. Nobody ever sits, during grade school, nobody ever wanted to sit in front. I guess that just sticks with you. Nobody wants to sit in front. What is that all about, Mandy?
I don't bite.
Right?
Mostly.
Well, mostly. If anybody would like to move, there's plenty of seating up here along the sides. So if you want to join us up here a little bit further up front,
Virtual
that'd be
elbow
great.
for joining me. Thank you.
All right, Dave, thank you so much for coming up here. All right, I know that we'll probably have a few people straggling coming in, and we'll get started. I did want to make note of something though. Last year, WTA was doing very well pre-COVID, and we were doing so well that we decided that we were actually going to branch out, and we were going to do not only a meeting in Milwaukee, but we were going to be doing a meeting in Madison, and it was going to be the same thing. I mean, we were growing, right? And things were going pretty well. That was on, and the first Madison event was going to be March 18th, today. So we're 1 year away from that. And I have to say, I still think that we're doing pretty damn good. We pivoted, a lot of people did, right? And I'm very proud of what this organization has done, and thank you all for your continued support of WTA. So that's a year, and if you want to clap, you go right ahead. And I can hear all the virtual clapping too. It's really good stuff. So, just a couple of housekeeping notes. Right in the back, we have a whole bunch of water, and so feel free if you get thirsty. Please refrain from using this door up here. If you have to go out, there's restrooms right around the corner, and there's another one down a little bit further. Hand sanitizers everywhere. Brookfield Conference Center has done a marvelous job of setting up for us. They continue to do so, and we thank them for everything they do. And if you need anything else, just ask myself or one of the other board members. Today, we have, I'm very excited for Mandy Huth is here, our VP of Cybersecurity from Kohler. She's came down to visit and talk to us on another security topic. I'm going to let you dive in. I know you have so much to talk about. Make it interactive. With no further ado, please welcome Mandy Huth.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this is my own personal thank you. I know we've all had different circumstances. You'll notice my mask matches my dress, and I have about 15 of them because you never know when you need to match. But thank you for being safe. I hope you all feel good being here. I was very impressed by the center, so feel really good about being here and being here with you. I'm super excited to be around people again. So with that said, let's get started. Today we're going to talk about identity and access management, and we're going to talk about Kohler and their journey. And I found, hopefully you'll find a tidbit or two. I'm very, very interactive. So if you have a question, just raise your hand. I don't want you to wait until the end because then it's not necessarily as relevant, and it really is about relevance. So I can hear myself talk at home. I've been listening to myself talk at home for like a year. So please bring the questions on if you so desire. Thought I'd tell you a little bit about my journey and about me. So I've been in a couple of different industries. I won't go beyond my security time, although I was in IT before that. At Tripwire, I was running the security organization. They were bought by Belden, and Belden is a traditional manufacturer. So I went from a software company to a traditional manufacturer that wanted to put that software on their network gear. And so that was really interesting. And then I decided I really missed the software industry, so I went back to Smarsh. And then Kohler, imagine this. They brought me up in July and told me how awesome Wisconsin was. I knew what I was getting into, but here I am 2.5 years later with Kohler, loving my job. And so, we've made lots and lots of interesting advancements in security, and I love my role. I love talking about all these different things. I loved this just because, I have actually a CISO mind map that is much larger than the one you see up on the left, but it's got like 100 bubbles. And we all know that security has at least 100 bubbles. And we have to stay on top of all of them. And so I thought I'd just put something there that showed that. So how about me personally, though? You're all going to get to hear about my technical components in my security. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about me and what I like to do. That way we have something to talk about if you're here on premise after the event. So I haven't been everywhere, but it's on my list. I'm an avid traveler. I've been to over 45 countries, and I've loved every single one of them. I have 3 wonderful children. I'm very athletic. One of our guests here in the room, I will not name names, has agreed to sign up to do my second half Ironman with me. So I have a training partner. We'll be doing that in Des Moines, Iowa in June. I'm super excited about that. When I'm not running or biking, I'm swimming, and I love to swim under the ocean too. Love to scuba dive. I'm still learning. I'm advanced open water, but enjoy being, it's actually, you're gonna find, I'm pretty excitable and I like to talk a lot. The water actually gives me a lot of really good silence, and my brain gets a chance to do its thoughts. And my newest activity, my newest hobby is I kite surf. So I'm just learning to do that. I can stand up. I can actually get my hand back in the water. I still don't get up every time. So I do face plant at least once in 10 times. So, you know, a lot like security. I get up most of the time, but sometimes I fall smack on my face. So what about Kohler? What do you guys know about Kohler? How many of you think we only do kitchen and bath? Okay, because you guys are all from Wisconsin. That's what I thought when I started looking into Kohler. You all know of the American Club, so we are in the hospitality realm. We have spas, we have hotels, we have international locations, and we have a chocolatier, right? We have restaurants. So we are in the hospitality industry, which includes PCI, guest access, guest identity, all of these wonderful things that we have to think about. We are in the power industry. So, you know, this is whether we're doing residential generators, which are becoming very, very popular after all of the extreme weather we've been having recently, to generator sets for data centers. And so, you know, those types of things, what kind of vendor access do we need? What kind of, you know, remoting in do we need? What kind of customer care do we need if it's a residential? And then there's kitchen and bath. You're like, well, you know, I'm at my kitchen sink. It doesn't matter who I am. But it does, right? Because we're moving into the Internet of Things, and we have connected products. I can tell Kohler to pour me 8 ounces of water. I have a shower that knows my profile is 104 degrees in the morning. Not really, it's 102 except on the coldest days. And then it's 99 after a workout, so it knows my preferences. And guess what? That's under a profile. And we could talk about privacy all day long, but it really also deals with identity and making sure that we have the right access we need, right? And as we move into med tech, we'll be moving even more into that and making sure that we have a solid identity plan. So that's Kohler. Now you know about me, you know about Kohler. So what are we going to talk about today? Today we're going to talk about this really interesting, I call it a buzzword. It's been around for a while, that identity is the new perimeter. So we're going to talk about the industry, talk about a few frameworks. We're going to talk about people, process, and technology. We're all really familiar with that, but hopefully you'll like my spin on it. We're going to talk about Kohler's journey and a case study of how we've been working, believe it or not, for 2 years on identity, and a year and a half on identity, and why we've taken that long. Definitely some watch outs. What do you want to avoid? And what were the lessons I've learned yet far? Sound good? Yeah? Great. All right. So identity is the new perimeter. So I Googled it because I love to see what kind of images come up. And I see all these different things. Identity is the new perimeter. You know, identity and data access is the new perimeter. And, you know, I think it's great. The long and short of it, for me, and I'd love to hear this, identity being a perimeter is not really new. Who would agree with me? It's not really new, right? It's been around for a while. It's always been a foundational principle. What I want you to take from this is identity is the new focus, And truly, if you get it right, it's the most efficient process to make sure that only the good people get in. So industry frameworks. I just want to bring these up because at Kohler, when I arrived, we didn't have a framework that we looked to. We certainly knew of them. And I was like, so how do you measure success? How do you know what good looks like? And they were like, well, we do this research and this research. I was like, you need a consistent framework. So you can see here, we decided to go with the CIS critical security controls. How many of you are aware of those in the room? Okay. So there are 20 of them. And of those 20, they're broken down into basic, foundational, and organizational controls. And there are certainly sub-controls under those. The important thing to know about these is if you're not doing the basic ones, you need to get on those right away. The foundational ones are really important too. You also have to determine what's most important and what's most relevant to your organization. So when I had to go to the board of directors and tell them a little bit about controls and the framework we're using, I outlined the top 4 that deal with identity because we were about to spend a lot of money and a lot of resources on identity. So critical security control number 14 is around controlled access. 16 is around account monitoring and control. Number 4 is administrative privilege. And number 6 is audit and logging. And if you think about those 4 together, right, if you think about the life cycle, those are really important controls. Now, you may not use the CIS critical security controls. You may have Department of Defense contracts. You may be working with the government. So you might have to use NIST 800-53. You can see here their list of identifiers and family names. One of them is access control, right? And one of them is identification and authentication. So you're going to find that these, they do map to each other. And then, some people actually like to have a certification. And ISO 27001 allows for a certification. And so if you look there, there it is, number 5, access control. And so even the ISO 20, well, not even, all of the frameworks include access control as a core tenet of their controls. So no matter which one you use, if you need a reference or you want to look at the controls you should be striving to apply to your company, having these gives you a lot of credibility and validation because you're following industry best practice. Right? So the 3 A's of identity, there are 3 of them: authentication, authorization, and accounting. So we all know authentication is who you are. You have to prove it to me. Authorization is what do you have access to? So now I know who you are. What am I going to allow you access to? And the audit and the accounting really go around logging and monitoring. It's that control where you're governing and making sure people have the right access, such as making sure that your lists don't have somebody that's terminated after, that they still have access 24 hours after their termination date. Okay. Today we're going to talk a lot about authorization. Now, Kohler, we had this conversation, and we said, what's most relevant to us today? Well, we have pretty good authentication. We have Microsoft, we have Active Directory, we have a lot of single sign-on, we have a little bit of federation. I won't say it's perfect, and we can certainly get better at it. But where we're really struggling, and we're going to talk about it, is authorization. You're going to find that at Kohler, it's very additive. Right? You move from one role to another. We didn't take away your old access. We just gave you some more. And then you went to another role, and guess what? You just got some more access. Oh, wait, how long have you been out of that job? So we really need to focus on that. So what are my program components? So we can talk about people, process, and technology. And I pulled this slide, and I really like it because it's not so much the people, the process, and the technology. Certainly, we're all really familiar with those. It's the intersection of them that really matter to me. So you can see that if you put people and technology together, you can innovate. And if you put a process and technology together, you can automate. But for me, putting people and process together creates scale. And scale is most important to me in my role because the more people that do it and the more effectively we can do it with large numbers, the better, the more confident I feel that we have a process that's sustainable and that I can defend it when I need to. But if you can get all three of them together, you get a big win. So, people, process, technology, in that order. And I'm a true believer of this, and I've heard a couple other people say it. You know, every component is important. I don't want to lead you astray there. If you don't have the right people, it doesn't matter what process or technology you have because you don't have somebody to support it. So it'll never work. And you can get a technology, but if you don't have the right process, you're going to build that technology without a guide map. And that's not good either. And so it's so important that you have the right team working on the right process. And then once you have those two things locked down, then you choose a technology that can enable that process. And I can't say it enough. I believe it. I'll shout it to the heavens. People first, then process. Kohler spent a year on process. Before we even looked at a technology, before we even started an RFP, we spent almost a year on process. Because if my team can't tell me, and we're going to talk about it, if they can't tell me what the process is, it doesn't matter what technology we buy, or we're going to buy the wrong one. And I don't want to say I spend $1 million or $2 and that we can't support it because it doesn't support our process. So you can see here some considerations that I put up here, some of the people for identity that might be needed. And I probably didn't even get all of them. But certainly cybersecurity, human resources. Make sure you have a Microsoft or an AD expert if you're using Microsoft or any email Active Directory type tool that you use. Make sure that you have someone that's really good at that. It's really important because all of your identity providers are using that linkage to make it work. There's an integration no matter what. Your business users, right? We know they're irritated, but do we really know why? So getting those people involved and really understanding their pain, it's so important. It's not just, oh, this system is awful. Tell me more. Why? Because it took me 20 minutes to change my password. Okay, that's a valid reason to be irritated. And then the application owners. The application owners are really, really critical to this, and I'm going to tell you why. Because if you can prove to them that you can take work away from them and automate it so that permissions into their systems can be rolled into your identity engine, they're really going to like you, and they're going to give you the resources they need. So lots of people. Process. And we're going to talk a little bit about this, but I will tell you, in terms of identity, it was usability first. Our system, it wasn't quite as bad as the 1980s, gray screen with little white blocks, but I was like, am I really asking people to go to this site? And it was so awful. Where do I click? How do I save? How do I do this? The usability of the system just wasn't there. So in terms of process, I could probably give away a couple capabilities, but if it wasn't usable, I wasn't going to pick it. Super, super important. You have to align with HR. I think you all know this, but I want to say it again because we spent a week in workshops with HR understanding their process. Because if we don't understand what their process is and we're just saying, oh, we're going to integrate this and we're going to import your data, it's not going to work. We actually spent a day of that deciding whether HR was going, the HCM was going to be the system of record. And we challenged that. I mean, most of us just take that for granted. So don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. Maybe it shouldn't be. If it's not in good shape, should it be? Or do we need to get it in shape first? Right? And as I mentioned before, you have to understand your business. At Kohler, we have several different audiences. And so, HR is like, are you going to include the manufacturing employees in identity as well? We don't today, right? They have a different way of, they have a logon light, and it's not in our identity system. How do we deal with contractors? Do contractors go through our identity system today? Sometimes. Not everywhere, not globally. What is wrong with our process? I mean, I'm raising my hand. We had serious problems. And then technology. Some of the things we started talking about, and some of the things you'll want to think about is, do you want a SaaS solution or do you want an on-premise solution? And there are good reasons for both. If you really want to customize, you probably want an on-premise solution because it gives you that ability. We had an on-premise solution that we call it, when we customize something, we colorized it. Oh yeah. And so we had colorized that thing over 10 years. And we hadn't given it the care and feeding, we'll talk a little bit about it, that it needed. And so I said, we are doing a SaaS solution. Unless there is a compelling reason for us to do an on-premise solution, we're going to do a SaaS solution. Do you know why? Because a SaaS solution does not allow for customization. That interface cannot be customized. It can't be changed. Well, we need to add this or that. Now, it's configurable. Don't get me wrong, right? There are things we can do in the back end to change settings and create some positive criteria. But, in terms of being able to change the solution so that when upgrade comes, they're like, oh, well, if you upgrade, you have to test this too, and this too, and this too, because you have all these customizations. We're not doing that. I want a one-touch button to upgrade, right, and really understand that. So thinking in technology, total cost of ownership, how much is this going to cost me if I customize it? Oh, too far. Let me do that. There we go. And as I mentioned, best practice configuration. Second, in the technology, I ask them, how can you prove to me that you're using which framework to get secure configuration within your application, right? So have they done their pen testing? Have they, are they using Azure or AWS? Or maybe they're using Google, right? Which cloud environment are you using? Do you have your own cloud environment? How are you configuring your systems from the ground up? I don't need every single detail, but I love when a vendor says, oh, we are matching the CIS secure configuration guides at 80% or more. That gives me credibility that I'm picking someone that has really good secure practices. On the same vein, I require it of the vendor and I require it of my people, right? So I ask them, what do we need to check? What configurations do we need to be checking? Right? Did we have to build something? We're about to integrate these two systems. Is our system in the most secure configuration? So again, taking all those controls, those 100 bubbles, I don't want an application. We've spent all this time on identity and we missed configuration. And as I mentioned, no, that's me, not my slide, no customization. Really important, and we'll talk about it a little later. I had executive commitment that there would be no customization without executive approval. Now, Kohler is moving away from a hierarchical culture. We want to empower people to make the right decisions at their level. They don't need to come to me for approval. But there are some non-negotiables, and we will not customize. The beauty of that, so I'm going to talk about this for just 1 second for you. The beauty of that is, if somebody says, well, I really need you to customize this for my application, I'm going to say, look at all these benefits I get you. We're not dealing with the edge cases. We're working towards 80%. And the edge cases, we're not going to address. They get to pay for and use the old system until they decide to upgrade their own system to get all of the benefits of the identity system. So no customizations. And if you're an edge case, you might have to pay for a resource to help us continue to administer this until you can get off of that. It's a little, I've tried to do the carrot before the stick. It's like, there's all these benefits. Come join us, right? I'm very inclusive. Questions? No? You guys are a quiet group. All right. I must just be wowing you. All right. So, how many people in the room know about the new shiny syndrome? How many of us have done it? Yeah. wow, that's really cool. I get to go to a demo and like, oh, I want that and I want that. It's like going to a car dealership. Of course you want the one that's decked out, limited edition, it makes pancakes for me at 6 in the morning while I'm driving down the road. But, I don't really need that. So, most often, and again, it goes back to technology last. Because when we see those demos or we rush in, we get the wrong motivation. Urgency drives decisions from the wrong context, right? We're excited about something, but we're not being realistic about our own criteria and relevance. So I'll give you an example. We looked at several vendors, unneeded or untimely capabilities. We were looking at some, and we'll talk a little bit about this, we were looking at some capabilities around role mining. And I gotta tell you, one of these vendors, I was like, wow, I want that. But then I saw, one, the price tag, and two, I was like, how long is it gonna be before I actually need role mining? And this other vendor has all these capabilities to get me up and running and scaling, and then I can start working on role mining. It might cost me a little more there, but I've got this big trajectory first. So, whoa, that was cool. I was like, oh, I want that. No, can't have that. And the other thing that Kohler was up against is our system was end of life. And, the person that was administering identity at that time for us, Mandy, our systems are end of life in November. Okay, what problem are we solving? Well, our systems are end of life. You're not telling me what problem we're solving. You're telling me my system is end of life. I don't care. Let's call the vendor. I bet they have extended support. You have to tell me what problem we're solving first. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But what's really important is there are alternatives. There are options. Don't let that drive your decisions. We went 1 year out of support with kind of an extended support contract for them to support us. It doesn't mean we could do upgrades or anything like that, but the system was stable and it was okay until we could answer the right questions. I still want the bright and shiny car. It's pretty cool. All right, how many of you have seen this wonderful comic? So if you haven't, what you'll see here, the top tree on the left, these are requirements. That's the swing that marketing requested. In the middle was how sales ordered what marketing had requested. And then, in engineering, that's how they designed it. And then, oh, it's cut off. I'm going to have to look. Give me 2 seconds. I forget which one it is. As plant manufactured it. Thank you. So then, we got the order in. It was engineered. That's how the plant manufactured it. What's next, Chuck? I can't read it. As the crew modified it. So implementation, we're going to customize. We're going to add something. But over on the bottom right, that's what the customer really wanted. So when I talk to my team, you're going to hear me say some of the same phrases again and again. And it's not an intent. I have more phrases. I can come up with phrases all day if you want them. But there are some really core ones that my team always, always, always has to be able to answer. And the question I ask them is, what problem are we trying to solve? What is the root cause? And we all came from an IT or security background. So when it comes to incidents, we're always looking for root cause. But when we start projects and we're starting to plan for them, we don't always ask what problem we're solving. We've got scope and objectives in what we want to do, but do we have a problem? I have another system, and I won't go into it in depth, but, my team is really excited about, again, bright and shiny new stuff in the industry. And I'm like, okay, but what problem are we trying to solve? What's wrong with this system? And there's nothing wrong with our other system. And so what problem are we trying to solve? Nothing. They just want the bright and shiny thing. So this is the first question everybody has to answer for me. We have to understand our business and what they're trying to accomplish. And I know that sounds kind of vague, but ultimately we did over 45 business interviews and said, why don't you like the identity system? Can you show me? How does that impact your work? And the number one thing they told us is, I can't figure it out. I spend way too much time doing approvals or reattestations. I don't even know if the person has the right access, or I have to call 3 times because the access isn't right. The number one problem we're trying to solve is usability. And in today's world, we had a system that was 10 years old, and now, a year later after pandemic, consumer, and I say consumer, whoever your customer is, in this case, mostly internal, their expectations have risen exponentially, at least squared, right? Because we've all gotten really good virtually. We already were, most likely. But all of our customers now expect an Amazon-like experience. Can I do this? Is there a checkout? Can I be done? Can I get it in 2 days? The second problem we're trying to solve, efficiency. This one was for us, right? Usability for the customer. Efficiency for us. Every single termination at Kohler is done manually. So we turn off the AD account. That's an easy one. But because not all of the systems are connected to single sign-on or to our identity system, we have to go in and we have to manually go through all of our systems and make sure stuff was taken out. That's painful, right? I'm like, please don't fire anyone today. Please don't leave the company today, right? It's just stressful. So we have to get efficiency. And with efficiency, we want to get cost savings, right? Who doesn't want cost savings? I want to be able to spend it on some of my bigger gaps. So if I can make us more efficient, spend less time, then I save the company money, and I can ask for that money back or just move it over in my budget, right? So what problem are we trying to solve is my very first question. The second question I ask people is, what does good look like? How are you measuring yourself? Not just metrics measuring yourself, but what are you measuring yourself against? So if you guys had to guess what that picture is, any guesses what that is? Credit score. How do we know that? Because it's an industry standard. We all know what to look for. It's consistent, right? We can measure our own credit because we know in the industry what to expect. I know where on that level I fall, and I know how to improve or lose points, right? If I go out and ask for 4 credit cards, guess what? My score is going to go down because I have all those inquiries. If I pay my mortgage on time for 12 months, that score is going to go up because I have credit history. I know what to expect, and I know how to measure myself. Seems pretty easy, right? So what does good look like? We have to go out and do the research and say, how have other people done it? What does the industry say we should do? I've talked to, and some of you in the room I've actually talked to about identity. It's, what are you doing? What are your customers doing? What problems have they had? What pitfalls should we be watching out for? I've talked to Gartner. I've gone to, what's the other one? No, not Forrester. That's not the one I'm thinking of, but thank you. I'll come back. You can ask me later. My apologies. And I want to know what those best practices are. The second part of that is, I love the critical security controls, but a secure configuration, to get 100%, you might as well just turn the machine off because it's non-functional, right? So when I do secure configuration, I have to determine what's relevant, what risks actually apply to my environment. So you have best practice, and then you have to add in your company's relevance. Is this relevant to my business? Is this relevant to my IT ecosystem? Not everything will be. So you have to make sure you understand what's important and what's not. And the way that you do that is you have consistent guidelines. Right? So you have something to benchmark yourself against, and then you can apply relevance. And then, again, credibility. If I talk to my CIO and I say, this is why we thought this was good, even though we're only at 70%, we didn't turn these things off because they're mitigated. Or they're not relevant. We don't even have that, so we're not worried about it. Of course, I turn off unused services. Don't ask me that question. So what does good look like? For my identity, I wanted this to be a little more specific for you, not just way up in the sky. This was my table of contents. So I'll give you a minute to look through those. I won't go through all of them, but the first thing we talked about is our executive summary, our scope, who our stakeholders were. Data integration was a really long section in there because it's really important because we're about to integrate with all these systems and make them work in our engine. So what best practices were we going to leverage? Can it be an API call? Are we going to use SOAP? Are we going to do this? And so all of these different mechanisms, we talk a lot about data integration there. We talk about roles and how we're going to approach them. We talk about the A's. Also very important, how are we going to govern this? How are we going to operationalize this? And what is the architecture going to look like? What's allowed and disallowed? And we did all of this before we even started looking at technology, not even allowing on the meeting table. Because until you know what you want, if you start looking at technology, you start thinking differently. So really having a neutral position as you talk through those things. Does anybody disagree? Nope. Okay. So we had a what does good look like document. We also mapped out some things that we wanted to make sure were covered in those. So when we reported out to our stakeholders, we were able to tell them industry frameworks and benchmarking allowed us to make sure that we address these things. Whether it was an intuitive user interface, again, usability, is it intuitive? Had to be. I mean, again, everybody we talked to said that was really important. Because if you don't get adoption, where are you? You're no farther ahead than you were. Industry standard protocols, I kind of mentioned that. Making sure the connections to on-prem and cloud applications, right? Because we still do have some on-premise applications. So that connection to whatever vendor we use has to allow for both. The ability to have multiple parameters for an ID within a well-formed identity. So for us, one of the things that was really important is, can I somehow attach to my identity, my personal identity, such as, when I leave Kohler, can I get relevant news to my mandyhuth@gmail account, right? So how can we connect those? Can we make it easy to interact because our personal and our work lives do intersect at some point? Or as a pre-hire, right? I filled out the job application with my Mandy Huth Google account, and now I have a different identity, but you can't find my job application because, I used a different account, or I have to create a new account to enroll in my benefits, even though, if those systems all worked on the same identity, wouldn't that be lovely? So that was really important to us. Contextual intelligence, really, really important to us. We want to know, not just, and we'll look at an example as one of them being me, right? Who am I? Where am I? What's my job? What entitlements come with that job, right? So being able to not only know those things so they have the right parameters or fields, but also being able to say, oh, Mandy lives in Wisconsin, but she's in Tanzania logging in at 2 in the morning. Is that legit? Well, last year in February, that was because I was climbing a mountain. So I might have checked in before I started my trek. But it would alert someone to say, oh, that doesn't seem right. Or it might say, this group of this entitlement for accountants is there, but they haven't used that entitlement in 8 months. Do they really need that access? Is that a once a year thing, or is it just something they think they need? So a lot of contextual intelligence. And that goes with the next one, AI, AI and machine learning to assist that governance, creation of those policies, auditing and making sure, does this look legitimate? Are there anomalies here? How do we fix that? And this was really important. We want the ability to back out changes if they're not completed successfully, right? So, it's okay to fail fast, learn, but be able to roll back if you can. So, anything I missed? Anything you think might have been something to add to this list? I'm trying to get you guys involved. Come on. All right. Okay, here we go. I'll repeat your question.
A couple times while you've been talking, I forgot that you're talking about identity management, because this is just really good general advice about buying enterprise software.
Yes.
So far, it's good. I like it.
Great, thank you. So the comment was, so far I've forgotten you're talking about identity and access management, because this is just good practice, and I do it with every single thing I do. So we're getting ready to get into the case study, but these were really foundational pieces that I think no matter what you're buying, you should be asking these questions. Absolutely. Person behind him, do you have a question as well?
Yeah. My other thought was, what about consideration with compliance? Does that fit into like a baseline of what good looks like, or are you striving for compliance, or is that kind of like at the end? Where do you fit that in?
It's a great question. So where does compliance fit in? So my teams, I really like Venn diagrams, and I like my life cycle. My teams work together. So my governance team is on my identity team. And we've talked about what does the reporting look like? What does the alerting look like? How do we know? How can we prove or evidence in our IT general controls when we get audited? How can we prove that? We know what it looks like today, and that was one of our proof of concept questions. Show me this report. Show me how to run that report. How easy is it? So it is part of our design. Absolutely. Great question. Yeah?
Process technology,
Yeah.
trying to organize all that. So one of the things I've witnessed in this exact space is bringing, you're correct, I agree with what you said in terms of bringing HR, the AD teams together, the IS teams together. And it seems a lot of these projects that I've been witness to, they don't get jump start. No one lights the spark to bring these disparate teams together with all of them having their own schedules and all of them having their own project timelines in the midst of all this.
Yes.
Did you find yourself coordinating that? Or, I mean, how, especially the size of Kohler, you know, how do you get those people together to even align?
No, great question. So the beginning of the question was in terms of people, process, and technology. Under people, there were all those other departments that have their own agendas, and how do you get them rolling with you, and how do you get their resources? Great question. So we're going to talk about it. I spearheaded it because it started at the top. I said I'm going to spend a lot of money, and I communicated. You're going to see it about 5 times in the next slides, because I wanted every single person to know that this was coming, and I put my neck out there. Oh, and I forgot to show you guys my logo. Damn it. Sorry, did I say that out loud? Nobody heard that. Great. I meant to put it in my slides, and I would have put it right there. Anyway, I do a lot of communicating. I had, and this started a long time ago. I said, hey, we're going to interview you because we're going to get a new identity system. Hey, I want to talk to you about your applications because we're getting a new identity system that's going to make your life easier. Hey, I want to talk to you because you do the most approvals out of anybody in the company, and I want you to be my champion. So it's an effort. It is part of my project plan. So it can't just be a side thought. It is there is a communications plan, and I have to have it. And it is, are you a user? Are you a manager, approver? Are you an executive? Are you a business owner that might be impacted by this? And we talked a lot about it. And then I told them again, and then I told them again. And so when I went to them the 4th time, I said, and I'm going to need a little bit of your time. They really couldn't say they didn't know. So cybersecurity, I'm being the wallflower that I am, as you can see, I think I'm a pretty good communicator, and I probably don't communicate enough. So if I had one piece of advice for you, you're going to see it lots and lots. I think it's even on my last slide around lessons learned. Communicate. So, yes?
So not being a side project, needing to be a core part of it, what happens when your priorities are competing against the other priorities that department is tasked with?
Yep. So the question is, if it's my #1 priority and it's competing with the other organization's priorities. How do I compete with that, right? How do I get mine first? And I'll tell you, the way that I've approached it is I've said, how long do you think this will take, and do you have the resource? And if you don't, I'm willing to fund it. So in my dollar ask, I have dollars for contractors that says, okay, I need you on this identity project. Is there something in your work that I could just contract out and pay for so that I can have you because you're the expert? So that's how I approached it. Great question. Yeah.
So nobody likes to talk about this, but in the spirit of what good looks like, do you have a best practice around repeat offenders? You do all this stuff right, you think you have everybody aligned, it's the right people, process, technology, but yet there's repeat offenders.
Yes. So in fishing, we call them chronic clickers. It's my nice little term for them. But yes, I do have chronic offenders, repeat offenders. And it's a really tough conundrum, so thank you for your really candid question. For me personally, I will answer the happy hour too. We'll probably get more into it. But here's what I think. Security cannot be punitive, ever. There's no way I'm going to create a culture of security if people are afraid they're going to get in trouble. So that's my stance. Now, how do I address that? I educate till they're so sick of hearing from my team that they want to do it right. So we require, if you're a repeat offender, hey, we need you to take this 20-minute video. You're a repeat offender again, hey, you need to come to this 2-week program where it's 20 minutes a day. You're a repeat offender, hey, we're watching, or we're going to sit down with you and we're going to walk through this together. So they don't want to see me, right? It's like, okay, I got it. I'm not going to do that anymore. So that's how I address it. Great question. All right. So thank you for your interaction. I'm glad we got it moving. Does anybody need to stand up and stretch? See, I'm standing up. So we're about an hour in. We're going to talk about a case study now. So what did my journey look like? So at Kohler, they require a charter. And this is where you don't have to look at these. I'm going to talk you through them. What we use is a process called initiate, plan, execute, close. We call it IPEC. We love acronyms at Kohler. I mean, every company does. Let's make it shorter. But the proposal really includes objectives and scope. So what you see in the top, and again, it's not terribly important, other than to know the first thing, identify the problem the project will solve. What problem are we trying to solve is the first thing that we do. And then on the right-hand side is the opportunity. What are we going to gain by doing this, right? And those are pretty lengthy. It's not all of it, but I gave you a little snippet of it. The details matter. And the details matter first because the team has been thoughtful. But even more important, you can see here the scope and objectives. This initiative will cover all aspects of a successful IAM program for Kohler. And I make them list what our scope is. And I can tell you my project champion has to know how to answer every one of those. So scope is important. There are, underneath of that, there's a list of 5 things we're not going to do. We're not going to do as part of this project. So just as important as scope and what you will do is what you will not do. We will not do the edge cases. We're not going to spend effort on a system that we're customizing. So we knew what we would not do, and we put that aside. The other thing was, and I do this often, and it's a very agile approach, right, or Kanban approach, I made them prioritize the quality attributes in order. This took probably 4 hours of our dedicated time to argue about this, right? When I say argue, healthy dialogue about what's most important. So, you see here, usability. I said that's our #1 reason, but in the outcomes, the team decided security was the most important thing. Now, The user doesn't care about that, so usability is still, from a technology perspective, the most important to me. But security is, I want to be able to go to the board and say, we're protecting Kohler's assets, and I'm really confident of how we're doing this. And I know it's repeatable, and I know that it's right. So we did a charter. Again, this was not a small process. Before that were all of those interviews. We did some research into the industry. What does good look like? What problem are we trying to solve? And doing those things are super important because the team had to think about what's the process going to look like. So, who asked me about communication? The second thing we did was we created a steering committee. Now, you might think that that's bureaucratic, but for me, and you'll see here, I believe that your steering committee, if you build it right and not just levels up and hierarchy, can be your greatest ally. I had somebody that was on the Kohler executive team on my steering committee. I had somebody from each of my business units in my steering committee. So, who are my champions? Who are going and being my cheerleaders out in the business? The people on my steering committee. And so making sure that we had that representation condensed was super important. And they're the ones that when I hit an obstacle, they can help me break through that, or they can get me to the right person so that we can have a conversation. So a steering committee can be really, really powerful if you use it properly. It's not just for updates and updates to the board or updates to the executive team. It's how can you enable this project? So what do we talk to them about? And you see, it says no customization. I made sure that every single person on my steering committee was committed and aligned to that objective. So that if somebody comes to our steering committee or they say, oh, you know the old way we go, oh, mom said no, but I'm going to go ask dad, and maybe dad will say yes. And then I can say, well, dad said yes, or mom said to ask dad. We're not playing that game. Every single person on my steering committee knew that that was a key objective. No edge cases, no customization. So you can ask any of us, it's all good. I really think of this like a weather vane. In what direction are we going? Which way is the wind blowing? Are we against the wind? Are we in the wind? Or do we have the wind at our back and we don't really need anything right now? It's also a really great opportunity for education. So in our last steering committee meeting, we talked to them a little bit about agile principles, and we're going to talk a little bit about our journey with agile. And it's about visibility. And where are we? What do we need? It's about the risks. So how can you help me avoid this risk? Or what risk are we approaching? And do you have any ideas, right? They have experience too. So how do we avoid those risks? So really good, we only meet with them once a month. It's a half-an-hour meeting, right? We don't do meetings for the sake of meetings, but we want to make sure they know we're being successful or we're really running into this. So one of the things we were running into here was in our last meeting is we were running into a data import issue. And you might think that's just for the project team. But going back to resources, we had some issues that might have been the network, that might have been on the cyber team, or might have been on the vendor side. And we needed some help getting some additional help and really escalating that. I was able to deal with most of it. But a little note, I wrote the note and said, hey guys, I need you to do this, a little bit of feet stomping. And then somebody from my steering committee said, it's the right thing to do. They're about to be off track, right? And we've planned for that. So really, really powerful if you use it correctly. So after about 9 months, not quite a year, of doing what does good look like? What problem are we trying to solve? We decide that we're going to look at vendors. And of course, we had talked to vendors ahead of time just to know what's out there. But I want to go through a little bit because we spent 6 months on our vendor process. We did a request for proposal. We did the demos. We'll talk a little bit about those. We did a proof of concept, negotiation, and then references. Sounds pretty standard, right? So hopefully I'll be able to give you a few tips or things that we've learned through our identity journey. So I'm going to go back to what process are we using. For vendor selection, one of the first things is we did a request for proposal. And I know this sounds pretty straightforward, but don't skip this step. And I'm going to tell you why I say this. Our incumbent actually said, you know what? If you skip the RFP process, we can get you started on your journey in the next month or two rather than spending 6 months finding a vendor. Well, I know they want our business, but I'm like, we haven't had a new identity system in like 10 years. And you want me to just blindly say, yeah, let's keep doing this? You know, and there might have been some changes, but I'm like, this industry, the identity industry, has evolved like Pokemon 3 evolutions, right? Like it's completely different. So, you know, don't skip the step. Do the research, because you're gonna find some capabilities that you may or may not have that may really bring some value that you can add to your process. For us, and I'm just giving you a little example here, before we ever went into a product demo or a use case demo, which we're gonna talk about, we weren't allowed to talk to the vendor until we knew what criteria we were using. Usability was the first thing, support was the second thing. And you know, you might not be thinking about that because you're buying a new technology, but support was a huge issue for us with a couple of other vendors. I wanted to be able to call a support person and get first call resolution above 90%, right? We might not have a lot of calls, but when we have them, we need help right away. And we don't want to be waiting for someone or someone not understanding. So we talked a lot about support was one of our key criteria. How do you prove that to us? What metrics do you have? Who are the people answering the phones? How do they answer the phones? What's your time, not just time to respond, but also time to resolve, right? What on average are you trending? Then we talked about the technology. Notice it's not the first thing on the list. We're going into vendor demos about technology, and it's not the first thing on the list. And then the last one was culture. Now, I don't know how many of you think about this, but when we look at vendors, we do a lot of talking at the bar or wherever, you know, pre-COVID at networking events. What do you think about these people? What's their culture like? Do you know anything about them? Because we want to make sure their cultural beliefs align to ours. And, you know, it might seem like a little thing, but when you're working with these people for 3 years, potentially, right, to get this really rolled out and solid, do you want someone that you're butting heads with because your philosophies aren't the same? So definitely something to think about. And then we had a legend, how we were going to grade them. We had 30 people on these calls from all over. Some of them weren't technical, didn't matter. They might not have scored every question, but we wanted them there. We wanted them seeing it and say, what do you think? If you're the user, what do you think? Do you think you could use this? Do you like it better than the current system based on what you saw? Really getting that feedback immediately. So, you know, I protected the innocent. I took the names off. You know, document and weigh your critical needs criteria. So we talked about what the criteria were. Then we weighted them. How important are they on a scale of 1 to 5? And so some of the scores were weighted more heavily than others, right? Some things were more important to us than others. And so we had a list of the demo criteria. You can see we scored them out, and we came, you know, we came out with a very objective way of scoring our vendors. Now, in the room, anybody only go off objective numbers? Nobody? Okay, I'm really glad. Because I will tell you, this 3.4, we're like, oh, it's not that big of a difference. Like, is that material? Then we had a conversation about what your gut tell you. What do you think? When you got off that phone call, how did you feel, right? So again, objective, really important because you're asking for dollars. You have to be able to prove that you were objective in your vendor process. Procurement loves us. And then what does your gut tell you? And is there anything else you need to be thinking about? So proof of concept. We all know what they are. We all do them. How many people in the room do not use real data in some of your proof of concepts? Anybody? Nobody in the room doesn't use real data. Find that hard to believe, but I'm gonna go with it. Proof of concept is your chance to rigorously test functionality. Always use real data. Always, always, always. You might not be connecting to your production system, but create a copy. It's not always easy, but do it anyway. Make it part of your project plan. And with your proof of concept, I know this sounds just basic. Be specific on your requirements. We had very specific use cases they had to prove to us, not once, not twice, but thrice, right? Show me again. No, show me one more time. And we were always trying to figure out how we can make sure, is there any way we're gonna break this system? Are we only seeing that front line, right? Because, you know, it looks nice when, well, that's probably not a good analogy. I'm gonna skip that one, forgive me. You know, we'll call it kicking the tires. You know, kicking the tires, okay, they seem pretty good. Let's actually take it out on the road, see how fast it can go. What's the pickup? What's the traction? How does it turn, right? So really getting down into the very specific requirements. So now you've picked your vendor. You know who you want. They've done a great job. And you have to negotiate. Now for me, this is the hardest part of my vendor selection, because at Kohler, I'm not allowed to be involved. I have to bring the procurement team in, radio silence, and negotiate with the vendor. But I already know who I want. Can't you just make this happen? Come on, I want to get moving. But you know what? I've just spent a year of my life making sure we got the right technology. So you know what? Step back. Let procurement do their job. Our procurement team did a great job. Now, we do get involved. And the thing I want to mention to you in terms of negotiation, make sure that you read the master services agreement. Make sure that you, yes you, read the terms and conditions. 4 people on my team had to read that entire document, because my experience is different than their experience is different than their experience. And the questions I had were different than their questions, which were different than their questions. And some of them weren't important, but we asked them. So contracts are awful. Who agrees? Contracts are awful. Yes. Oh, they're so long. And I'm like, really? So spend the time. Because again, you're going to be with them for a while. If you've made a good investment, you're going to be with them for a while. So take the time. The other thing we did before we signed that contract, we asked for references. Well, you know, if I'm asking for a reference, I'm going to ask Kendall to be my reference, because I know she's going to give me a good reference. I don't know what Ben's going to say, so I don't necessarily want to give Ben as a reference name, right? Because who knows? He's a wild card. The vendor's always going to give you your best references. You guys know that. But you know what? There are 70 of you here in the room. There's another 70 of you online. I bet you know somebody that knows somebody that can find a good reference, an actual reference. We got one really good reference from our community, and I got one bad reference on purpose. Not a bad reference, just we're moving away from them. Why are you moving away from them? Who are you moving to? What should I watch out for, right? So not a bad reference, just a think about these things before you sign the contract. So when I say support references, again, you're going to be talking to these people when things are bad. Something's broken, something's not working, or you need something. Make sure your reference is not just how did implementation go. We dug into support. And honestly, support was a risk for us with our vendor. They are a European company, and there is a language differential a bit. And some of the feedback we got was that you have to be very specific. You have to give them examples so that they really understand the context of your question. It's a fair assessment. It's a risk we took, right? But we know it exists. And now we can make sure that people that interface with them understand that risk and mitigate it accordingly. So really important. All right. How many people in here want the Escalade? Maybe? How many people in here want the smart car? maybe. Some of us might just need a Passat. Who knows? The reason I put this in here is I'm going back to bright and shiny, as well as sizing your solution appropriately. Go back to your criteria. Remember when we talked about what problem we're trying to solve and what does good look like? When I talked about what does good look like, I told you to make it relevant, right? Remember relevance to your business? For me, at Kohler, I need the Escalade for identity. That's not true about all of my security components. Some of my stuff, I only need the Passat, and there are a few things I definitely have the smart car. But my risk isn't high enough to afford to really validate needing an Escalade. Now, having said that, I didn't end up paying for an Escalade. I ended up paying for a Passat. But it's mid-range, right? I really, again, the nice part was I knew that my risk and my gap was enough that if I wanted to spend money on the Escalade, I could, because it's that important to Kohler. But when I went back to my criteria and relevance and how do we close that gap, a Passat was enough. Okay? So again, I use this as an analogy because you have to size your needs appropriately. How big of a risk is this for your company? And if identity really is the new perimeter, then how important is it to you as an organization to get it right? Okay? And that's not just the cost of the technology. It's the cost of the people. It's the cost to bring on contractors to cover another group so that they can make sure that we have a solid implementation that's good for the entire organization. So I didn't have time to X out my vendor. So you guys, it's okay. Don't go spreading it around. Oh wait, you're recording this, aren't you? It's all good. So, we go back to vendor requirements. So as we're looking at the contract, a few other things that we wanted to be really clear about, and I call this out because even if we wouldn't have gone with these guys, they thoroughly impressed me. Because we had some vendor requirements that were not related to technology, not even a little bit. We needed a vendor that could work, again, we talk about culture, that needed to be able to work the way that we work. And Kohler is moving to an agile practice. And so if you get a vendor that's pure waterfall, and they're trying to help you implement in a waterfall methodology, and you're an agile shop, how are you going to make that happen, right? You're going to have conflict all the time. Who thinks to ask that question, right? We just say, let's get it implemented. But if your methodologies don't line up, you're going to have all kinds of norming and storming and trying to figure out how to make this work within your construct. So we needed a vendor that could prove that they had agile coaches, that they had an agile practice, and that they could align with us and that they had the support they needed to work within our construct. The second thing was the process. I see a lot of SOWs that come through, and they have, I'm going to call it a template for implementation. And it's solid, it's high level, it's milestones. These are the things that are going to happen. This company had a 100-page document on what their process was, and they included it in the contract. And I say it's 100 pages because it was really good. There was a lot of graphics, a lot of details. It wasn't just, we'll create this team and we'll do this implementation. It showed you, I could almost do it myself if I didn't need the expertise that they bring, right? It was like their run book. I'm like, this is like and of course it was at contract because, it's under NDA and I can't share that. But their Identity Process Plus that was on the slide, see over there? It really is a best practice process document. I was thoroughly impressed. I won't say it's the only thing that helped them win the deal, but it definitely made me feel like there was an immense amount of credibility in their ability to execute because they had a process document. And you know how I feel about process, right? Okay. So the one other decision with a vendor selection that you need to make is, do we bring in an integrator? And integrators have an immense amount of value. Because an integrator wants your ongoing business across your entire ecosystem, right? They are not just interested in implementing their particular product and getting out, right? So something to consider, sometimes it's right, sometimes it's not, is professional services are great at implementation. They know what they're doing, they know the product, they've worked through your specific, issues like yours before. They can help you with that. But they're looking at one product and one product only. They know how to work through those things, but they're not looking to help, architect this for the, across a holistic view of your ecosystem. A system integrator will do that for you. We have professional services right now because we're implementing the product. As we get to, and we'll talk a little bit about this, minimum viable product, we're looking at potentially bringing in a systems integrator to help us with all the application integrations, right? So minimum viable product, we'll talk about what does that mean, and really then bringing somebody in that can help us look across the ecosystem, right? Get the product in, and then as we start attaching things, what does it look like holistically? So I decided to tell you guys who we went with. I'm assuming, we're going to call it Chatham House rules from my perspective. Please, I don't want you coming and owning me because, I use Omada and they have a vulnerability. So implementation. Document your team needs. So this goes back to resource constraints and competing priorities. We had a document that was draft as part of our purchasing request. I'm going to call it that. We have special names for it. But we said we're going to need people from all of these teams. And this is how long we estimate that we're going to need them. Didn't have dates yet, right, because we didn't know when we were actually going to implement. And it wasn't really waterfall, right? If you use agile, you're pulling from a backlog. So you'll have release schedules, but you're not exactly sure when you're going to need them. And capacity planning, it's really, really key. And you have to think outside of your organization because you're going to need lots of people, especially during implementation, to do that. And this is where I go, even if it's behind the scenes, communicate the process and the future needs, because implementation is going to be a lot of infrastructure and security, maybe networking, maybe SAP, your SAP partner in IT, and probably HR. You know you're going to need them. You need to start communicating. My requirement for my project champion and my project manager was that we needed to communicate needs 3 months out. Even if we weren't sure exactly what it was, hey, we're going to need somebody from your team in the next 2 to 3 months, and I'd like you to plan for that capacity. So communication. You're going to see it again, because communication is so important. Even if it doesn't impact them. Hey, this is where we are, and we see you coming up, right? Pipeline. You're coming, your turn. It's like in baseball, right? Don't they have like an on deck and then what's the person in the in the hole? Thank you. I knew there was a third person. So you know who the next 3 batters are, right? We should be doing the same. We know what to expect. We've got this under control. We're going to need you. And then if you do run into resource constraints and they say, we don't have time for this, okay, when will you have time? Or can I, bring a contractor in to cover some of your work? I have 2 months to figure that out, not, we're going to be late on our release because I need them next week, right? It's, again, seems simple, but if you don't do it, you're going to run right up to a wall and you're going to be behind. And then you're going to start rushing and then you're going to make mistakes. So communication should be on your project plan. Every release, communicate next release needs. Communicate next release needs, right? It's always a standing task on our agile, on our backlog. Okay. So how many people in here use agile? Anybody? A couple of you? Good. So, a lot of traditional manufacturers, and I know there are a lot of those here in Wisconsin, I'm not suggesting you all are, we have traditionally been very waterfall, right? Here's the scope of the project, here's our go live date, and at the end, boom, go live. We got this, right? And you get a big celebration. But you can see at the top, that's what waterfall looks like, right? We build it, we build it, we build it, we build it, and at the end you have a brand new car. Agile looks at it a little differently. How do you get to a minimum viable product, something that you can actually, that's usable, that can be touched by a user, and then how do you improve, improve, improve? So get it into their hands, give them something, give them a skateboard. My son can skateboard to work, that's fine. And then iteratively, right, maybe it's a scooter, then a bicycle, right? So that iterative improvement continues, but I got him to work. Might have taken a little more, it might have been a little, rough around the edges, but we got them something that was usable to them. That's a culture shift, right? Because people expect it to be right and to be perfect. So there's a lot of change management that goes along with this. What I will tell you, though, is when you have agile teams that are working through a backlog and that can work on their own because they know what's next and they know what they're working on and they can work independently, works amazing. They're just highly efficient. So huge kudos for agile. We're still working on it, right? We're not perfect at it. We've only been doing this for a while. And we actually ran into some road bumps. We tried to implement agile right away for minimum viable product. And what we found with this particular implementation is we needed waterfall to get to minimum viable product, which was about 8 weeks. And then from minimum viable product, we switched to agile with a backlog. Okay, so we had to do kind of a hybrid, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be binary. It doesn't have to be a 1 or a 0. So setting expectations, culture change for many. Absolutely. Continue to communicate. Communicate that this is, the minimum viable product is absolutely better than what we have today. And the first release is going to give you this and this, and the second release is going to give you this and this, right? And you start pulling backlog. And if you can deliver improvements every 4 weeks, one little improvement. Here's one new report. Here's one new approval. Here's one new system. People start liking your system and they don't mind coming back because it's getting better and it's getting better. And it's still better than what we had. So just a way to, I'm always a look on the positive side. Not that I'm not realistic. Okay, watch outs. Do not try to boil the ocean. Identity is huge. And that's why I like Agile. We said, this is what it takes to implement it. If you did identity as a waterfall project, we all know those can take 12, 18, 24 months, and they're phase. But that first implementation, we are going for it. We're not trying to boil the ocean. We're going with minimum viable product, which is basically just Active Directory parity, right? And then we will get better and better and better. But we'll be able to get rid of our old system right away at minimum viable product. So we have parity. And then we're going to improve. And so, one of the things I tell my team all the time, progress before perfection, right? Go for it. It's a little, got a little rough around the edges. It's okay. It's better than what we have. And really enabling them to make those decisions. Some very specific things that we have ran into that I will give you as tips are integrations. When we talked to our vendors, we had a list of our top 50 applications, and I think only 10 of them, and this is across the board, across vendors. Vendors like to say, we have an API for that, or we have, we have a SOAP integration for that, or we have this integration for that. There are like 3 or 4 different, and I apologize, I'm not remembering the other big one. There are 3 or 4 different connectors. Yes, and not all connectors are created equal. So look at your application list. Make sure it's prioritized. We have our top 20 prioritized, and one of our criteria was that at least half of them had to be out-of-the-box integrations. The other ones we could use, the SOAP integration, and we could figure that out. It's fine. Some of them didn't have integrations, but they can build them. So we built that into the contract, that they had to build those integrations for us if they were, well-known industry-type software, not the little podunk application that's on one server under somebody's desk at the main office. So that doesn't really happen mostly. So that actually did happen at a previous job. I was like, where is that application? It's under your desk. So that was pretty interesting. It was an engineer. He's really smart. But that's another story for the bar. He was really smart. He got it to work, and he set it up. So we just had to get it secured. So integrations, really, really important. Data imports. This is really important, and this is why I said use real data, especially with identity. Use real data. During the POC, we used real data, and our data import was failing again and again and again. And I said, we're not signing a contract until you can prove you can do this at least 3 times, right? And then when they did get it right the first time, it took forever. We're like, what is going on? You told us during this demo, you showed us how fast this was. Did you have like 4 identities in there, right? We have a whole bunch more than that. So prove it again and make the time shorter. And we had very, very, very specific criteria that they had to meet in that use case before we would move forward with them. So pay attention to your data imports, use real data, watch the time. Make sure, and when I say use real data, don't just use real data, use a real environment. Use the same, if you're using a secure web gateway, make sure you're using the GRE tunnels. If you're using the network, make sure you're using the exact same configuration off of your primary firewalls, right? Is it going to look just like your production environment? And I will tell you, it worked during the POC. We got it to work. It didn't happen. It was bumpy. We had to figure it out. Guess where we hit another speed bump during implementation? Data imports. Something is different. We haven't figured it out yet. Now, we figured out a way around it, but I tell you that because if you're not using the exact same environment that you're going to use in production and you run into issues, I know it sounds, again, very simple, but we do it. Or like, oh, but it's working, and we think that's right. Be very specific. Make sure your environments match. Because if not, when you're trying to build your production environment, we spent 12 days trying to figure this out and a whole load of resources. And we're like, I thought this worked during the POC. What is different? How do we root cause? It was painful. So pay attention. The other, yes?
When you were selecting vendors, obviously you were doing demos. How many POCs did you do? Was the POC only with the one you went with? Or?
Sure. So the question is, during vendor selection, how many proof of concepts did we do? We did 2. So I didn't put it in there, and I should have. In my head, I meant to tell you guys about it. When we did initial RFP, we sent out to 5. We scored the RFPs, down selected to 3. Did initial demo and use case demo with all 3 of those, down selected to do 2, and did a proof of concept with both. One of them went away pretty fast, though. I mean, we didn't dig in because we knew as soon as we started doing proof of concept where we wanted to be. You're welcome. Good question. Okay, the last one I want to talk about. How am I doing on time? I'm still doing good, yeah? Okay, data quality. We've all heard the saying, I'm sure, garbage in, garbage out, right? What do you do when the data is not yours? Right? You've got all this data you're importing from HR. So this is where we got to pull out our communicator card, and we got to be best buddies with HR. Okay? We know during what problem are you trying to solve? We identified. Are you all sitting down? Oh, yeah, you are. Everybody on the camera sitting down? We identified over 11,000 roles at Kohler. That means 1 role for every 4 people. Are you kidding me? I know we don't have that many different jobs at Kohler, right? So I've got all this data that they're going to want me to import into this system. And I probably don't need most of it. So how do we mitigate that? So data quality, when I say quality, volume, quality, how do you match it? Again, identity systems are going to be able to match fields. Be very, very specific about what fields you should be using. Is it really relevant? And this is where, I call myself a rule breaker. I don't know if I'm a rule breaker, but the rules don't interest me a lot of the time because I say, why? Why not? Right? With identity, you need to ask the hard questions. Why do we do it that way? Because that's the way it's always been done. Well, is that a good reason to keep doing it? Right? So don't be afraid to rock the boat. Don't boil the ocean. So if it's not boiling and you rock the boat and fall out, you're not going to burn yourself, okay? I just made that one up. It's kind of corny, I know. But I try to keep it lively. So data quality, make HR your best friend. Understand the process. Sit down with them. One of the first systems I ever learned was SAP R4, right? So I know all about benefits, and I know all about HCM and all those pieces. So I was really lucky that I had that context. I said, hey, can you, I haven't done this for about 10 years, but I remember what it used to look like. Can you walk me through your process? Why this? Help me understand that. Communicate with HR, because you need good data quality to make your system work. And one of the things you're going to see, I'm a big hashtag fan, and you're going to see it in lessons learned. One team, one score. It's one of my hashtags. Because if HR isn't winning, Kohler isn't winning. If IT isn't winning, HR isn't winning. We're all connected, right? We're one team, and we all want Kohler to succeed. And so how do we succeed together? How can we help them succeed? How can we make their process better? That might mean I have to pony up some money, which I have had to do, especially around contractors, because our data quality for contractors is completely manual, prone to human error. We had to fix it. So we have spent a substantial material amount of time fixing our contractor management process so that it will fit into this system. And when I say fit into this system, it's industry best practice, right? So we're getting them to the better way, okay? I had to come up with the money for it, but that's okay because I win too. All right, I thought you'd get a kick out of this. My son actually overlaid me on Rosie the Riveter. We're gonna. I know it's great, right? I don't know that my biceps that strong, but I was like, I decided to share it because I'm not afraid to put myself out there. This gets its own slide. Communication is key, and you cannot communicate enough. And the reason communication is key is because communication creates visibility, and when you create visibility and you deliver on your commitments, you create credibility. So people will keep coming back. One of the IT's hardest things, everybody deals with credibility, right? Because the business either doesn't understand the requirements and we have to fix it, but we're still late, right? Nobody's winning. Create the visibility, commit. Agile allows you to commit to releases and backlog. So you don't have to commit to this big giant jump house at the end. You just have to commit to getting to the fair. And then you commit to getting a caramel apple, and then you commit to the Ferris wheel. And then maybe we'll get to the big jump house, right? So commit, communicate. Communicate has to happen, because if you commit and deliver and nobody knows, you don't get your gold stars. And your team doesn't get the recognition they need for the great work they're doing. Don't wait until the end at the jumpy house to tell your team they're doing a great job. Tell them when you get to the fair. Wow, you guys didn't argue in the car. Well done. Let's get a caramel apple. Let's go do something else. Right? Hey, you guys waited in line really, really well. You can tell I have kids, right? You waited in line really well. Let's go ride the Ferris wheel. And on and on and on. Good job, good job. Let other people know what good job they're doing so that they become trusted advisors. Communication, visibility. I cannot, and the engagement scores, off the charts. Because they, in an agile methodology, they have the ability to do the work themselves. They don't need my approval. It's a culture change. Do it yourself. You have my implicit authority to do what is right for Kohler. I trust you, but I'm here to help you. I'm here to advise you if you need it, and I'm here to remove roadblocks. They have the ability to work as a team. They have the ability to get results, and they get recognized for it. Who doesn't want to work at a job like that, right? All right. So the path to go live. Release schedules. Again, we're using agile. Every release has to have user acceptance testing, right? It seems pretty much, normal go live type procedures, but user acceptance testing includes usability questions. Was this easy to use? Is there benefit to this feature, right? I don't need to give you a feature. I could give you 10 reports, and if none of them are useful to you, what have I spent my time on? Launch. So we're getting ready to go live next month. Almost ready. Prioritization of applications. I told you we have our top 20. We have them prioritized 1 to 20 by risk. Interesting tidbit, our old system. Told you, we had a system that was end of life, and with a termination, we have to manually turn things off. Our old identity system of our top 20 applications only addressed 11 of them. 11 applications. Right? It's painful. So we're getting them parity, we're going to launch, and then we're going to give them more, one at a time, right? One after another, every month. And then it's iterative, very feature-based. It could be an application. Every release doesn't have to have an application. It might be a new report. It might be a new subset of entitlements that are automatically done when somebody's hired. So don't lock yourself into it must be an application, because then your release starts to feel waterfallish, right? What's the little feature I can give you to make your life a little easier and a little easier and a little easier? And I'm going to make sure you know what those are. Okay? Rinse and repeat. What now? So after launch, what are we going to do? And then we're going to get our applications in. What are we going to do? I just want to bring this up because we've done the work, and again, Cynthia's not, Cynthia, wonderful woman, retired from Kohler, so I can use her as an example here. When we talked about what good looks like, and we were trying to help the business understand, HR talks about roles, and they think about SAP roles, and those roles have all of these different criteria on them. And I said, ultimately, though, if you think about a role, we really want to think about not roles, because people confuse that when they use SAP roles. I talk about jobs. Am I an accountant? Am I a cybersecurity analyst? Am I an engineer? And then when you want to talk about roles, those roles have entitlements, because here you can see we're in Kohler, Wisconsin, but I'm in IT. So my birthright access is going to be different than Cynthia's, because I'm in IT. And I need some other things that she doesn't need, and she needs some things that I don't need. But we're both managers, so we're going to share that entitlement, right? There will be some systems we share. Cynthia's probably on the mergers and acquisitions team when we talk about engineering development. But I'm in compliance, and she's not. So you can see the different roles we have. And based on that, what kind of accesses do we get? So I use some systems, right? They're going to be a little bit different. The reason I do this is we're already thinking about it. We're thinking about jobs and the technology we've chosen. So jobs, right? We already have that. And then we have role mining that's going to help us understand what are really close names. These look really similar, accounting 1 and accountant 2. Do they need different access? Shouldn't those be the same? What are the anomalies? As I mentioned, this accounting entitlement that you have hasn't been used by anybody in this group for 8 months. True story. Do you really need that access? So it's going to help us. What I would say, though, is role mining is another place where you could just, like the ocean, you could be swimming for miles and all of a sudden you are lost, right? You're out at sea. Don't try to boil the ocean. Be very specific. Make sure role mining is definitely included in your identity technology. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? It just needs to do what you need it to do. So what now? Now I've got all this great system. I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it. What are we going to also be working on? So we're going to be working on some authentication improvements. Who doesn't want an easier password reset? Who doesn't want to be able to we are moving. You see a password journey to passwordless. Kohler, I can say this now because we've finished that journey. We had 8 character passwords, and I've moved us to 14 character passphrases, aligned with business industry best practice. However, I gave them a bone, right? If you go to 14 character passphrases, first let me tell you what a passphrase is. It's just a sentence, any sentence, but I'm only going to make you change your passphrase once a year, unless you have some kind of incident or we feel like you might need to change your password. So we're trying to get to passwordless. In the interim, we're trying to make it easier for users. Instead of having to change your password every 60 days, you only have to change your password once a year. And we are moving towards looking at systems, right? Because in order to do passwordless, you need biometrics. Not everybody has a phone. Can we use our computers? Does everybody get that computer? Is that computer usable with biometrics, et cetera, et cetera. So we're looking at our journey to passwordless. And we have multi-factor authentication in multiple places, especially within the administrator accounts. Absolutely. Critical security control. Number 4, right? Administrative privilege. We make sure we have multi-factor. We'd like to, whether with the password journey to passwordless, if you have 2 things, if you have a PIN and a biometric, what is that multi-factor authentication and how do we do that across all of our systems? So that's what we're looking at. Phased process will get you there. We can't boil the ocean. We picked one thing, which is authorization, our biggest gap, and we're working through it. So what did I learn? Told you I'm a hashtag gal, and my team actually knows most of these by heart. The first one is secure by design. Why do I start with what problem we are trying to solve and what good looks like? Because if you design with the end in mind, you don't have to be at the end when you start, but you know where you're headed, right? If I'm trying to get to Madison, if I don't know I'm going to Madison and I'm just going, I don't know where I'm going to end up. But if I know I'm going to Madison, then I know I have to go on a different interstate. I'm not sure which one that is yet, but I know there is one, and I'll get a map because I know where I'm headed, right? So design with the end in mind. Have a vision of what that system should look like. And that way, every decision you make is made in that context. If there's a decision to be made right now, it doesn't mean you have to implement it all now. One I already mentioned to you, 1 team, 1 score. Identity's big, needs a lot of empathy because you're impacting a lot of people. You're impacting every single user at some point in their associate journey, whether it's when they start, whether it's when they change jobs, whether it's when they leave, your company, whether they need additional access because they're on a one-off project. You're going to touch them all. So have a lot of empathy. Remember that if we make it easy and they can do their day job and not have to worry about identity, then that's a win for Kohler, and that means we're winning too. Early and often. 2 sides to this coin. One is you need to get out there early and often and communicate and let people know what you're doing well ahead of schedule. I told people, so let's see, I signed the contract in December. I told people about the new identity system in March. I said, you're not going to remember this in 9 months when I come back to you, but I'm telling you it's coming, right? And I have a list of stakeholders, so they couldn't say I didn't tell them. And then I told them again. And then I told them again, right? Iteratively. The other side of that is encourage your business partners to come to you early and often. The sooner you can be involved in any new implementation means you can get them into the best practices, right? We don't want you to rework. Bring us to the table early and often. Ask for a seat at the table if they don't invite you. My team's like, well, they didn't invite me. Did you ask to be invited? Get your butt in there, right? Don't wait for an invitation. We need to be there. And the last one is shared responsibility. We all know from security is a shared responsibility. And I really think if we can make identity easy and, approachable, then people don't mind doing the secure thing. So shared responsibility, but let's make it easy so they want to be responsible with us. And then right dead center, always, 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 communication with lots of asterisks, 10 of them actually. through the entire process. You don't have to, I don't communicate to the end users every week, right? They don't need to know every week. Know which audiences need to know what information. Make communication part of your planning through every step of the way. Who needs to know? What should I be telling them? Why do they care? Always start with the why. Okay. And I think that is what I've got. Identity can be done right with time and perseverance. The extra time is worth it. If I tell you anything and you walk out those doors, you know, I am all about agile and moving fast. And with identity, the extra upfront work is going to make the rest of this journey that much easier. So a lot for the extra time. It's worth it. It will save you money, total cost of ownership, because you're going to get it right. And, you know, just be persistent. So that's what I've got. Any questions?
Oh, come on, there's got to be something. Okay, you started talking to them back in March about the new system?
I did.
Well, it just so happened that a pandemic hit us in March.
Yep.
How did you have to pivot, or did you?
I didn't. So the question was, you know, I told them about this in March. It was right before the pandemic, but yes. I told them that this was coming. So we did the way that we told them was we knew we were going to, we were trying to create enthusiasm, and that's why I really wanted to show you my logo. I might just have to send it to you so you can paste it up there. The way that we did that was we did a logo contest so that people felt committed and engaged to a logo. So we created 3 logos with marketing that would really speak to people so they know where they are. And we did a contest. And we landed on My Access. It's a really cute little key and a keyhole. It's really good. I can't believe I didn't put it on here. But I'm going to keep going. So I didn't have to pivot to the end users because, again, it was behind the scenes. I had to pivot a little bit with like HR, right? Because all of a sudden we've got all these work from home people, and how do we get them remote access, and how do we turn this on? So there were some delays, yes, but we were able to continue because we were in vendor selection, but we did have to adjust some of our timings for some of the HR components. So we did have to shift a little bit, but from a communication standpoint, the message is clear. We need to move to correct authorization, birthright access, to make it easier for people to join us and for people to get the access they need. So I was really fortunate. Yes, sir.
I really like what you said about making security approachable. Does that mean you still mandate training?
Oh, good question. So the question is, I said that I want to make security approachable. And so the question was, do I mandate training? The answer is yes, but only 20 minutes. So I think anybody, like, I spend more than 20 minutes playing Words with Friends every day, right? So come on, don't tell me you can't spend 20 minutes just making sure let's just double check that you remember what phishing is. Let's double check that you know that from a privacy perspective, if you're touching social security numbers, you need to do this. And it, you know, those 2 or 3 core things, just reminders. And then we do newsletters.
How often do you do that?
So the question is, how often do I do it? The 20-minute training, once a year. Yep, super easy, right? If you tell me that that's onerous to your business, I'm probably going to tell you you're kind of off kilter. And I'm not afraid to say that, to my own detriment sometimes. It's really 20 minutes in a year? But then we do phishing campaigns, which are not, again, onerous. And we do newsletters. I do a lot of communication. I do videos. I do a quick, hey, it's IRS tax time. You know the IRS will never ask for your social security number, right? In an email, those types of things. So we do lots of reminders throughout the year, but only one required training. Good question. What else? Yes?
So I've helped a lot of organizations create stronger password policies like you did, so that's great. One of the challenges I've seen is people struggle with how to create a 14-character password.
Yep.
Did you do anything specific around education about saying you can use spaces or you can use Yeah, how did that go?
Absolutely, I have a video. You know, again, though I think most people want to do the right thing if they know how to do it. And that makes security approachable. So, 14 characters, holy cow. I was like, hey, guys, don't stress. My last password was, I eat oatmeal 5 days a week, period. I've got an uppercase, a lowercase, a number, and a period. That's a 23-character password. Wow, I'm really secure, and that wasn't hard because it's relevant to me and hard to guess, right? Or a space. So I did video. We sent out 2 or 3 communications. We let people know, and we rolled it out slowly. And it's gone really well. Once people understand they don't have to do the funky characters everywhere because it's so long that it has entropy, they don't have a problem with that at all. So I have gotten, because of the amount of communication we did, I got very little grumble with the organization. And giving them very clear examples, right? My kids are 5 and 9, period, right? Okay, yeah, you shouldn't be telling, your password should not be your kids' names or their birth dates. But you can say my kids are 5 and 9. Nobody's going to guess that, right? So giving them very solid examples and having people in the business that know how easy it is really helps. Yes, sir?
So if you give me a passphrase, that's fine. Typing 14 characters once a day is bad. How many times do I have to type it in based on lock policies, timeouts, systems that aren't integrated with the systems that I need to access?
Absolutely. So I'm not sure the question came through. The question was, okay, 14-character passphrases once a day, not a problem. What about all the systems that aren't connected, or timeout policies, or lock policies, et cetera? Yes, it's a good question. The answer is we are trying to create as much single sign-on as possible, right, to minimize that. Again, in an effort to bring those edge cases in, how do we get you into single sign-on, which probably means some updates to your system so that you don't have to do that, so it's not painful. We're definitely considerate of end-user pain. And the other piece of that is, you know, I don't know about you. I'm a pretty fast typer. A 14-character passphrase really doesn't take that long. So, you know, if you think about how many words we type a day in email, that I ask you to do that 2 or 3 times a day just doesn't feel onerous to me. And sometimes I have to agree to disagree, right? So, and then I say, but I could get you onto single sign-on if you'd like, and let's talk about that. So we work through it. Yes, sir.
I was looking at your LinkedIn, and you were on the West Coast before you came here. Maybe this is a fun question, but is there anything unique to Wisconsin in this process here, culturally or whatever, that any insights you might have on that?
Oh, really great question. That's a unique question. I thought you were going to ask me what's unique to Wisconsin. I got a whole bunch of those. So yes, I came from Portland. Hopefully you like my LinkedIn profile. You'll have to let me know. And I would say that for me, I'm because of the pandemic, so I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable here. Because of the pandemic, so I was here for 1.5 years, and then the pandemic hit. So, you know, first 6 months I was in temporary housing, and then I was traveling, and then I bought a house. So I hadn't had a chance to really build community. And right when I was about ready to build community, I had to go home. So community, I'm super excited to be here with you guys. So for me in Portland has a huge technology community. And so I had built that network as well. And so I had lots of people. So for me personally during this journey, I have some community that I've built, but not a lot here. So that's been a challenge for me. So I encourage you all to use resources like the WTA to build that community, because that, you know, during this process, I actually called some of my West Coast friends and said, hey, you know, I know this isn't relevant to you necessarily, but what do you know, right? So community is huge, and I know Wisconsin has a strong community. I just haven't had a chance to build that yet. The other thing is a lot of the West Coast, we're really technology focused, a lot of software companies. So Portland's known as kind of like the Silicon Valley of the Northwest. between them and Seattle. And so a lot of software. So I'm very familiar with Agile, Scrum, and here companies are just most companies are just learning, picking that up. So that's a little bit of a difference. But otherwise, I think the team that I have and the people that I've met are just as meticulous. They, what is the similarity is they all have not enough budget to do what they want to do. It doesn't matter where you live or what industry you're in. And people are just so helpful and useful resources. Use each other, right? Know each other. So that would be the big thing I would say. I don't know if that answered your question, but anything from the web chat? Oh, we've got a quiet audience out there. Okay. Well, I know it is 2 hours, which is just what I was asked to stick to. Oh, we got one more question. All right. It better be a good one. Is it a doozy?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. You were mentioning that communication is obviously, it's critical when implementing change, whether that's a security control or a new process. What is Kohler doing to communicate effectively, given that a lot of people are remote or working in different environments? Like you mentioned a newsletter. I'd just be curious what other tools you guys are using to communicate and collaborate internally.
No, that's great. There are a host of things that are available to us, and I'm assuming you mean security to everybody else. Is that true? So I'm still, if I had to pick one skill that I'm upskilling my team on, it's communication, right? And my team is really solid and they're great executors and, they have good relationships with other groups, but broader communication is honestly something that we're still working on. What I did do though is I got a communications resource from marketing to help us. And so, we have an internal intranet with a turnstile, right? And news stories all the time. That same turnstile has 2 to 3 stories at the end of the week that are highlighted. I make sure I'm on that turnstile or something in security is on that turnstile at least once a month. We do newsletters from a cybersecurity inbox that allows us to warn people or tell people what's coming. And then I try to do a video once a quarter. And then we have a SharePoint that has from the desk of Mandy. And I put something out there as well that just says, here's our accomplishments, here's what we're doing, and here's our roadmap. So, lots of different forms because people learn different ways. The other thing that I've done is I've created a group of leaders that I feel like are security champions, and I try to get them to have a virtual happy hour with me once every month or two, just to say, hey, how's it going? Have you been hearing anything? And really getting the vibe from the technology. And that's really useful. I know I do it from a security perspective, but I'm also able to take a lot of that back to my peers from an IT perspective. Great. Well, in the spirit of communication, thank you all for having me. Thank you for being such an engaged audience and for all of your great questions. If you'd like to communicate more, you can find me on LinkedIn, or I will be out at the networking event. If you feel safe and secure doing that, I would love to make an introduction. So thank you again for having me.
You're on. Turn it on.
I did turn it on. There. All right, so I was wrong. Mandy, thank you so much. That was fantastic. Somebody had texted me and asked, I have to ask, are those slides confidential, or is there anything you can share? Or perhaps the person that's here that texted me could approach you and perhaps steal 1 or 2 slides from you.
I am open to scrubbing slides or getting specific slides. I don't know that I'd give you the whole deck, but I am happy to share anything you found relevant.
That person knows who they are, and we'll point them out. So make sure that you say something there. All right, let's see.
Yes. That's true. If they really want to go through, they could snip it. You could snip it. We are all in security. I cannot stop you from taking a screen share.
Can you throw up the next slide? Yeah, I'm ready. Might as well, let's get right to it. Listen, she brought up the fact that we were going to be at a bar like 4 times during the presentation, and I'm the only thing between that. So thank you all. I hope you, I hope, what? It's not accurate anymore. I want to thank everybody here for taking the time to come out today. I hope you enjoyed this. There's more to come. So we're going into April already, and Troy, outside of everything here, is there anything you want to share? We got together with our friends from ISSA, and we're going to be talking more on the personal side of cybersecurity. We're in the process of getting the panelists. I think we have 2, and then we will have a panel of 4, I believe, and it will be monitored by Matt and the folks from ISSA. Correct? Yep. Okay. And so that's on April 15th. So mark your calendars, and really mark your calendars down for May 20th, because this gentleman, I had the opportunity to meet Tim while I was driving. Tim is right there. Tim is the CIO from Generac, and I am really excited about his energy, because to your point about getting to know the community and getting to know people as resources and really kind of build up the whole southeastern Wisconsin, if you will. Not to keep you out because you're a little bit further north, but that's okay. But Tim is very involved with Summerfest Tech Days. He's very involved with the Milwaukee Tech Hub, as the WTA is as well. But we're really excited about him telling the story about Generac and the things that he's had, he has going on. Very energetic. Really looking forward to him being our keynote, and we're working on the rest. But Tim, thanks for coming out today, and thanks for taking on the keynote for our tech conference, which is on May 20th. Now, that event is our crown jewel. We put a lot into that, so get registered early and tell all your friends. So, and then in June would normally be our summer celebration, which we kind of break away from technology and we have a little bit of fun. Unfortunately, the one that I was looking into, we were going to do something at the Summerfest, on the Summerfest grounds, but I found out that they can't do anything on the grounds just yet. So I'm working on a contingency plan. I found that out the day before yesterday, but we'll work on that. Other than that, if there's any interest in sponsorships or memberships, per usual, ask anybody on the team. We're more than happy. Thanks again to Brookfield Conference Center. They're not done. Their work gets started now. We have a reception right down the hall. The chef always comes up. We don't pick anything off of the menu, but he picks 3 different creations, and he's hit them out of the park every time the last few months. So we're going to be going right down the hall here. There's plenty of room, plenty of space for everybody. Open bar, alcohol, non-alcohol, whatever you want. But again, thank you so much for your support of WTA. I look forward to seeing many of you over the upcoming months in the warmer weather and all that stuff. And Mandy, thanks again. All right, let's go.